at not what it means to be a disciple of Jesus necessarily, but what does it mean for those people who God specifically calls to a task. And so we spent a number of weeks on that. We've looked at different ways the call is played out in different people's lives. You know, that God seeks to replace great leaders, that he sometimes asks you, that it often comes with a challenge, that the cloak is thrown over you, that it demands a response. You need to respond to what God has called you to, that there's a cost attached to the call, that there's some different kinds of postures that we should have. There's the serving posture, the learning posture, the anointed posture, and then we talked about the blessing of the call. And it's just a great opportunity we have over the next couple of weeks to hear some testimonies of people who have been called by God and have followed through on that call. So for those of you who are in a position where you're just sensing the call of God even now, and you're not sure what it might look like, it's one thing to hear the story. We know it's true in the Word, the story about Elisha and Elijah, but it was written some thousands of years ago. You know, it's a story from thousands of years ago, a wonderful story, no doubt we can draw truth from the Word of God. But I'm just so excited to be able to hear a story that's from today, from real life people who are going to talk to us about how God called them and how God led them. So I'm not going to muck around anymore. We're going to ask Janet Mumford to come. She's going to share with us about the call of God on her life. I want you just to enjoy the testimony and celebrate with her what God's done in her life. Thanks. Let's give her a hand.
I'm just going to have a drink because I've been singing loudly and because the mic was off. Okay, so Lex gave me some questions to talk to tonight. And the first one was, when did you first sense a call from God? But I really sort of had to go back a little bit because to me, the time before the call was incredibly important preparation time. And a scripture that meant a lot to me through that time and still does is from Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1, which says, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven." So for a long, long time, probably a decade or more, Mick and I felt that when he did his 20 years in the army, when that was over, that we would like to give back in some way, that we'd like to be fairly financially independent and be able to give back maybe in ministry in some way to people. We felt we'd been blessed and then it would be time to give back. So it had been in our heads for a long time. And those years while we were waiting, they were years of character preparation for me. I was a stay-at-home mum of, in the end, 5 children, and they were times of building integrity. I didn't have a boss to work to as such. Nobody was really watching how I spent my day. I was answerable to Mick, obviously, but really I was answerable to God about how I spent my day, what I did with it, how I used my money, what I did with my children, how I trained them up. Would I put the shopping trolley back when I went shopping? When I got home and discovered that I hadn't been charged for an item that I bought, would I go back and pay the money back to the shop? All those sort of things went on in that time. We lived in rental houses up until when we moved to Brisbane 4.5 years ago, and I looked after them even better than I would look after my own house. So would I look after and care for everything that God had given me? Also during that time, I spent a lot of time listening to Bible teaching, reading Christian books and reading the Bible. We usually lived a long, long, long way from any extended family. Some of our postings were quite lonely. Mick was often away for long periods of time. So during that time, I also learnt how to fight for my family in prayer. I didn't always have people that I could call on, and I had to call on God and rely on Him. So that season was a time of learning how to fight as well for my family. Then about 10 years ago, our family moved to Quantico in Virginia in America. Now, we had been living in Townsville for 2.5 years. The girls were in a lovely Christian school. I had made some really nice Christian friends and I did not want to go. So I fought God the whole way over this. We knew that it had to be God because it was a very sought after posting and we had not asked for it and we'd been given it. So we knew there must be a reason why God sent us there. The first few months were incredibly tough. We had a lot of difficult situations happen. And so I would always be saying to God, what on earth did you send us here? What was the point of all of this? But while we were there, we lived on a marine base and in an apartment building. And out of the 6 families in the apartment building, 4 of us were Christian families. Now, we had never, ever experienced mixing with military Christians, so it was a whole new experience. And the women, we were just sisters together in Christ. We lived our lives 24/7. We were very close. And that was a very special time in the end for us. Also at that time, Mick and I met an older couple who ran Officer Christian Fellowship over there. Very motivated couple, and Mick used to spend time with the husband and I spent some time with the wife, just very loosely mentoring, I suppose, just a friend really. And I also went to what was called Women of the Chapel, which was a gathering of Christian women on base. About 60 women used to meet once a week, and we would break into small Bible study groups and have some fellowship and some singing. My neighbour in the apartment just next to me happened to be the president of Women of the Chapel. And so when things would get rough, she'd come over and have a bit of a vent to me and an offload. And I used to think, oh, I'm so glad that it's you doing that and not me. And you're strong and you can handle that stuff. But oh no, I could never do that. So I'm so glad that it's you, and I'm very happy to listen and pat you on the shoulder. So that was that time. Now, one of the things that our family loved to do in America was go to a retreat centre called White Sulphur Springs, which was run by Officer Christian Fellowship. They were really special times where we mixed with other military families, people who understood our lifestyle and what we were going through, and were also Christian. They were special times, and we wanted to go back one last time before we left the States. So 3 weeks before we came home, it was Easter, and we went for our last retreat. Now, in one of the sessions, Mick took, our youngest then was Gabby, and she needed to have a sleep, so he took her back to the room to have a sleep, and I was there on my own in the session. And I can't tell you what the guy was talking about, but when it came to the end, my heart was just broken for the Australian military, and I was crying, and I don't like crying in public, so I ran out of the room. But my heart was just broken, and I ran up to the room and I said to Mick, we've got to go back to Australia and do something. We've got to stand up and be part of the Military Christian Fellowship and whatever's happening in Australia. And Mick looked at me, that's what I've been trying to tell you for the last 18 months. But I was a bit slow to catch on. So we then moved back to Australia, and we moved to Canberra, and Mick said that he wanted to get involved in the Military Christian Fellowship, and just a few months after we got home was their AGM, so he went along just to stick his hand up and say, I'll serve however you want me to serve. Well, he got elected chairman. So, but that's okay, because God had wrecked my heart over this, so I'm like, yep, you're meant to do this, and I'm meant to support you in it, so it's all good. A year later, at the next AGM, Mick had formed a new sort of council, and it had 2 members' reps on it, and he wanted me to go to be one of the members' reps. And I dearly wanted to serve God and was like, oh, this would be awesome to do it, but I wanted to be sure that it was really God that wanted me to do it. So I fasted and prayed for the days leading up to the meeting. And I threw out a fleece to God, and there was a lady that I knew would be at the meeting, and I said, God, if she sort of turns and says, Janet, would you put your hand up and be a member's rep, then I'll know that it's right, and if she doesn't, then I won't. And nobody was sticking up their hand at the meeting to become member's rep, and this lady went like this, and she almost pointed to me, and then she went past to someone who was brand new and had nothing to do with MCF before, and she said, how about you? Would you be a member's rep? And part of me was crushed because I wanted to do it, and I almost did, but then it was a no. So I accepted that that's what God had said, and that was it. So 6 months later, I was at a very big conference. We lived in Sydney at that point, and Mick was supposed to come with me to this conference, but he'd got deployed to Timor very unexpectedly, so he wasn't there, and I went on my own. About halfway through the week, I was listening to Bill Hybels. He was one of the speakers, and he was talking about what wrecks your heart and about calling pastors, and I just felt such a strong sense that God was calling me to be a pastor. But I thought, hang on a minute, this is all wrong, because he's meant to be calling Mick to be a pastor, and Mick's not here, but he should be here. So in the break, I texted Mick and I said, what's going on? You should be here. You should have just got this call to be a pastor, and it was given to me. And Mick said, no, that's a call for you. So that was a bit startling, but I went, okay. And then a week later, I was visiting with Mick's family and quite ill, so I was just lying in bed one morning and just really heard God say to me, I want you to start a ministry to military wives, and it's to be called Solid Rock Ministries. And the title comes from Matthew 7:24 to 27. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. And I just think that's a really good name to call our ministry to military wives. God's got a good idea there, because we go through a lot of storms and floods. We go through deployments, we go through moving, we go through lots of times where our husbands are away and lots of struggles. And we want to be able to stand firm, and we can only do that if we've put our lives on the rock, which is Jesus. So Solid Rock Ministries was to be a networked ministry for military wives around Australia. And initially when I told Lex about this call, I said, I didn't have the cloak thrown on me by somebody else. But then in the week I realised that I actually did. It was when I was in America, and God had me mentored by somebody, had my neighbour be the president of Women of the Chapel. I just didn't realise it at the time, but that's where he threw the cloak on me, and that's where he wrecked my heart for military ministry. Okay, secondly, what was the challenge? What were some of the responses that I gave before accepting the call? So for me, it was like Isaiah, woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips. I know my sin. I know all of my weaknesses and my insecurities. God, how can I possibly do this? So it was that kind of insecure, this is a big thing that you're asking me to do. But there was also excitement, because I really wanted to serve God, so I was excited too that he was giving me this opportunity. One of the big things that hit me straight away was, because for years I've been saying to God, I want to serve you, but it's actually not up to me to tell him how I'm going to serve him. And that was a real epiphany, a light bulb moment for me, because if you had said to me 10 years prior that God was going to call me to start a ministry to military wives, I would have run a mile, said no way in the world do I want to do that. So I learnt through this experience that it's up to me to respond and to say to God, I want to serve you, but it's not up to me to tell him what that call is going to be. Another challenge was I'm a female, and some denominations don't like females being pastors, so that also was a challenge to think through. Another was, would I go to Bible college? Isn't that the logical thing to do if you're going to be a pastor? And Mick and I looked at Bible colleges, but the more I prayed about it, I felt that God was saying, no, that's not actually what I want for you. That's not my call for you. The challenge of doing Solid Rock Ministries is that I'm very out there. I'm not in a structure. Who's going to help me do this? Who's going to help me with this ministry? How was I going to do it? I felt very unqualified to run a ministry. I've never done that before. And the biggest challenge for me was getting involved with military wives, because you've got to know this call is from God, because before that I wanted nothing to do with military wives. I'd had some really bad experiences with them, and I did not want anything to do with them. I thought I was holier than thou, saying that when we lived in a location, I went to the church and I was in the local community and I'd be involved in school, and I thought I was a very well-adjusted person because I was doing all of that. I felt a little bit like Paul, who 1 minute is persecuting Christians and the next minute God's saying, now I want you to go preach to them. Well, I felt a bit like that. I wasn't persecuting military wives, but I didn't want anything to do with them. And now God was telling me to turn around and go back in there and minister to them. So that was a big challenge for me. When I got my call, I didn't share it with a lot of people, but only just a few trusted people. And one of the friends that I shared it with is quite prophetic, and she prayed and she gave me this verse that she felt was from God. And it's from Luke chapter 14, 26 to 30. And it says, "And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.'" So that was a challenge for me. How do I count the cost when I've no idea what the cost will be? All I could do was think about what costs there might be. I knew there would be cost on my time. I knew that there would be cost on our finances, that there would be cost on our family. And I had to think through all those things. And then I had to think through, how long would I do this for? And for me, I just came to the conclusion with God that I will do this for as long as he calls me to. If he wants me to do this for the rest of my life, then I will. So that was as good as I could get with counting the cost. But it was really good to think about it and really think through. I can't just say I'm going to do this for a year. Really think through the ramifications of saying yes to the call. So the costs, what are some that I've had to pay? The cost of loneliness. God's given me this vision. I can see things, but other people can't, and that can be quite lonely because I'm carrying this vision. And some people do get it or get a little bit of it, but it can be lonely carrying a vision and not so much trying to convince people, but trying to show people what that vision is. I'm not part of a church, and so often it's not recognised because I'm out there and it's not a church ministry. There's a cost of being misunderstood and judged. I've found Christians to be my harshest critics, and that's been really hurtful. I've had to face hostile women when I've made decisions about groups, and they haven't liked it, and they've been quite nasty about it. And there's just been some nasty things there. The cost on my family. Each year I travel and visit each group. So currently there's 5 groups around Australia and I visit them. I miss my family dreadfully when I'm away. My heart is to be a mum at home. There's always an attack on my mothering and my family before I go away. And after I do these visits, they're not holidays, they're work, and I'm tired, very tired when I get home. But I just have to get straight back into life at home. So that's a cost. One of the big costs is the cost of going through the same experiences that those I am called to pastor go through. That's why God's called me, because I can relate to the women. My husband has deployed many times. I've done the midnight runs to the hospital with children because my husband's away. I've experienced just about everything that anyone I ever talked to has experienced, and that qualifies me to do the ministry because I understand, I get it, and when I talk to women, they know that I get it and they know that I understand what they're talking about. But that's a cost, that I've had to go through the same pain as they have. Then there's a cost of giving financially into the ministry, giving of my time to run the ministry as a whole, and then I also run a group here at Enoggera on base, my time to travel. I prepare study each week for the group on base and serve them, so there's time there. I can't just get up on a Wednesday and think, I don't really feel like going to Solid Rock today, so I won't bother. I've got to be there every week. There's a lot of sacrifice, and just before I went on one of my trips away a couple of years ago, and I was a little bit frustrated because it seemed like I was only going to go to a couple of people, and it just seemed a bit of a waste. Like it's a lot of money and a lot of effort for a very few number of people. And God gave me a passage which has really touched my heart, and it's from John chapter 12, and I'm not going to read it all out, but you'll know the story when I start to tell you. It's about Jesus, and he was at Mary and Martha and Lazarus' house, and Mary broke a bottle of oil onto his feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And a lot of people, the disciples, thought it was such a waste because that bottle of perfume, which is this exact oil, was worth a whole year's worth of pay. And they said, what a waste, that could have been spent better. And God just spoke into my heart through that and said, The extravagant sacrifice that you're making is a sweet-smelling aroma to me, and it's not a waste. It might look like a waste to people on earth, but it's not a waste to God. Each person is important, and the fact that I'll go, even if it's only a couple of people, that means a lot to God. So ever since God spoke to me about that, that's encouraged me that it doesn't matter. If I feel like God's telling me to go, then I go. And it was a bit like what Lex talked about with Elisha, how he burnt the oxen and the yokes, and we could have thought he could have sold them and that would have given him some money for ministry, but it was like this extravagant sacrifice saying, I'm going to follow you, God. Well, I can relate there too. Okay, how has the serving, learning and anointed posture been a part of your journey? First, there's lots of reasons why I need this posture, but there's two that are really important to me. It's so that I remember what I'm doing, like why am I here? And it's so that I don't get bitter. It's God's ministry, it's not mine. I'm not trying to build the kingdom of Solid Rock Ministries, and I'm not trying to build the kingdom of Janet Mumford. I'm building the kingdom of God. So it's up to me to be obedient to God and to his call, and to do the things that I feel he's telling me to do. The outcomes are not up to me. It doesn't matter whether in this ministry there's 20 women, there's 200, there's 2,000 or there's 20,000. That doesn't matter. What matters is that I listen to God and I'm obedient and I follow him and do what he tells me to do. It's important for me to remember that because at times people disappoint, and the very people that I'm doing all this hard work for can be quite hostile and nasty back, and that can be really hurtful. If I was looking to them for my affirmation and for encouragement, I could be disappointed. Now, some of them are. Please don't think that they're all like that. Some of them are incredibly encouraging and supportive, but I can't rely on that. I need to rely on God, and I need to work for God and do his business and not be worrying about the response or not from the people that he's called me to serve. He affirms and encourages me. So a scripture that's really meant a lot to me and that I just say to myself all the time is humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up, from James 4 verse 10. So I have a serving posture. I just serve. I serve my group here. I bake for them. I prepare studies for them. When I travel, I serve. I'm not going to be served. I go to serve. I'll never ask someone to do what I'm not prepared to do myself. When I go often to our group on a Wednesday morning, I'll clean up everyone else's coffee cups that they've left there through the week, and sometimes I get cross about that, but then I think, no, it doesn't matter. I just need to serve God and he will honour that. And also, there's some people that have hurt, and I can pray for them. That's a serving posture. I can pray for them. It doesn't matter what they've done, I can pray for them. Then there's a learning posture. I've made lots of mistakes, but I try to learn from my mistakes and not do them again. I've had to ask God for help over and over and over again. I've never run a ministry before. I don't know how to do this. I need his help. So I go to him often for help. One of the big things I've had to learn is that I'm a feisty woman, and when I get a nasty email, I just want to get on the computer and tap, tap, tap and send one back. And I've had to learn that's not a good thing to do. So what I've put into my life is that I will not respond to a mean email until we've had an overnight time to just rest on it and for me to calm down. An instance where that I did it, and it was a good thing, in a location, not here, somewhere else, we'd had a big, Defence have a big outreach, sort of a fun day for families early on in the year, and all the groups that support Defence can go to that and hand out flyers and things like that for their group. It's a big way of advertising that you're there. And for Solid Rock, we hand out a gift as well as some information about us. So this group had worked for months to get their gifts ready. They'd had a long day handing out flyers, letting people know that they were there, and then the next week they were having a big outreach morning tea. So come along to our morning tea, meet us and see what we're about. So this is a big deal. And 2 days before it, someone calls and says, oh no, we've got a funeral on that morning and you can't use the room, you probably can't use the room next to the chapel because we've got this funeral on. But this person had a better idea. How about you all come to the funeral, and that way you can see what a military funeral's like. It was a funeral for a family whose child had died. Now, my little went, you've got to be kidding me. We're going to have all these new ladies coming along and we're going to say to them, hey, we're not going to have a morning tea this morning. We're all just going to go to the funeral and sit there. I was thinking, that's not going to work. But instead of reacting, I waited overnight and God gave me real compassion for this person and an understanding of how things were from their perspective. The next day when we talked, we were able to find a very amicable solution and we were able to have our morning tea. But I just learnt from that it's definitely better to wait overnight. I always check in with God about making decisions. I don't just go on what I think. I'll ask Him about it. And I keep myself accountable to others, and I ask trusted others' opinions. The anointed posture, I've learnt that in my brokenness, I reach way more people than in my strength. I used to think when I led a group that I had to have it all together and just, be able to say, yep, this is it and this is how it is. I found that in my brokenness, as I share my struggles, as I am totally honest with where I'm at, I've reached far more women and ministered to far more through that. Okay, how has God helped me in my call? What have been the blessings in the call? Well, first of all, God gave me 3 very special people who have supported me from the day that I got the call. The first one, of course, is Mick, and I'm so blessed to have him. He has helped me so much in leadership. How do you lead people? What do you do as a leader? And in management of the ministry, how to manage things. He's always there to help me and discuss stuff with me. And I'm just so thankful for him. I couldn't have done it without him. The next is a chaplain friend that we met when we first came back to Australia from America. And he has continued to support me, guide me, mentor me, just spiritually from that angle, and just keep my eyes on Jesus and not get about building the kingdom of Janet Mumford or the kingdom of Solid Rock, but about following Jesus, being his disciple and going wherever he tells me to go. He's just been awesome, and his pearls of wisdom I've been sharing tonight, they're just all part of me, and he's been an incredible blessing. The other is a very special friend who lives in another location, who's always there to intercede for me. She's got my back. I can always talk to her, and even if she hasn't got the answer, she'll listen and she'll pray with me. The verse that the chaplain gave me when I first got called into this ministry was, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand," from Isaiah 41, verse 10. And that's been the case. I've needed God. Often I have nothing else but God, and He needs to be my strength. He needs to uphold me, and He needs to get my hand and walk me where I need to go. There's been blessings just in the birthing of the ministry, and I haven't got time to talk about it tonight, but if ever you want to ask me about it, I love to tell the story of the miracles that God did just to get the ministry going. There's been times when I've been incredibly discouraged and really needed God to come through. One time was when I went to visit another location for the day, flew thousands of kilometres to sort out a situation, and by the end of the day I was absolutely exhausted, and I slumped down in the chair at the airport and said, "God, I think I missed it. I don't think I'm meant to be doing this, and I need you to encourage me." And not 10 seconds later my phone rang, and it was a soldier from the army base that we were at, and I was involved with some others in getting Alpha running on the base, and he rang me to say, "I want to do that course." And that was just God encouraging me, "Yep, I want you in this ministry and keep going." There's been lots of times when random emails have come through at just the right time to encourage. Also, when I go on trips, I've found in the last couple of years that there'll be one, apart from talking to the groups, there'll be one person that comes up to me and says, "You are meant to be here today for me. I needed to hear that," or "I needed to talk to you." And that's such a blessing for me that God would use me in that way. God's shown me how to deal with difficult situations, so I know He's there and He's helping me, and that's a blessing. He's provided people at just the right time, and He's provided finances. I never ask for money, and if I don't have money, then I can't do my trips away, and we can't give the study books to the ladies for free, but every year the money is there. So that's a blessing too. So finally, what one thing would you say to someone considering following the call of God? Because I'm a woman, I couldn't possibly just give one, so I had to stretch a little, sorry Lex, and give two. And the first one was, always remember that you're about building the kingdom of God and not your own kingdom. And that He called me to pastor and he's called me to do Solid Rock, but he could take me out of that and call me to do something else. It's about me being obedient to God and listening and following him in whichever direction he calls me to go. And the other, which was the very, very, very wise words of the chaplain that supports me, when I found out I was called, he said, "You will be attacked and blessed more than you ever have been before." And I always remember that in the midst of some incredibly vicious attacks. He told me that. Yep, he did. And then in the midst of the most incredible blessings, yep, I would be blessed more. Would I advise you to follow the call? Absolutely. There's nothing else worth living for than to follow God.